That morning, the stone steps before the Arlington federal courthouse witnessed a scene few could believe, a woman being slapped across the face in the very place meant to embody order and solemnity. The sound cracked sharply through the air, slicing through the lingering dawn mist. None of the silent bystanders realized that the woman just humiliated was the very person who would preside as the highest judge over the historic trial set to begin the next day. Elena Morgan walked with steady steps, her hand tightening around the briefcase containing top-secret files from the Romano case. She wore a light jacket, jeans, and a pair of worn sneakers that had carried her through hundreds of late nights. That simplicity made the three officers standing in the shadows to the right of the steps treat her as someone who did not belong there. Elena's expression did not change. She had known since the previous night that the morning would begin this way. But knowing was one thing, facing it was another. Officer Daniel Cotter was the first to step out of the shadows. Tall, sharp-eyed, his features carved with bias, his mind divided people through crude instinct. Anyone who did not look like they belonged in the legal world had to be checked. Elena had not even snapped her files back together when his voice tore through the air, loud and unrestrained. Identification now. She paused, still polite. "I work here, officer. I am heading to the courtroom." But being a woman in her early 40s with an unadorned face made her words meaningless to Cotter. He stepped closer, ripped her driver's license from her hand, holding it up to the light as if searching for flaws. South Side District. "I know this type." Behind him, Officer Linda Parker stared at Elena with an uneasy discomfort, not because of Elena, but because of Cotter. Elena's calm gaze was too steady, too proper, too unlike the kind of vulnerable person Cotter usually targeted. Something felt off, but she did not dare interfere. The briefcase slipped from Elena's hand when Cotter swatted her arm. Files spilled across the steps, federal seals flashing briefly in the sunlight before Elena quickly shielded them. She knelt, collecting each page with precise movements that did not match the behavior of an ordinary civilian. That precise composure irritated Cotter even more. He struck her the slap so forceful that her head tilted, but she did not lose her balance. The blow hit her pride far more than her skin, yet Elena drew a long, slow breath, letting the pain settle. She could react. She could give an order. But not now. Parker stepped closer, her voice slightly trembling. "Sergeant, this situation?" Cotter cut her off. "Routine stop suspicious individual, do not interfere." Elena rose without anger. Her hand brushed her phone, dialing a single number. 3 quiet words, softer than the wind. "It has begun. Proceed with the plan." Around the steps, distant onlookers raised their phones, hesitant and fearful. No one wanted trouble, but everyone wanted to record what they believed was a normal police check. Elena looked at them without resentment. She had seen that same fear countless times during the 18 months she spent undercover. She continued into the courthouse. 2 federal security officers saw her and immediately opened the door. Their reflexive respect made Cotter freeze. Something was wrong. Something he could not name. A shadow of power he had overlooked. Parker watched this and felt her heart sink. She was beginning to understand. This woman did not just belong here. She belonged to the very heart of this building. To its authority. Cotter stared after Elena, anger mixing with unease. Why did they let her in? Who was she? Elena did not turn back, but inside she knew well in only a few hours the truth would surface. And when it did, that slap would not just be an act of abuse. It would become the first piece of evidence in the collapse of an entire corruption network Cotter did not even realize he was standing in the center of. She stepped into the marble corridor, the light catching the faint red mark on her cheek. It stung, but she did not falter. She held her head high, exactly as a federal judge preparing for the greatest battle of her life should. One thought crossed her mind: they underestimated me, and that is their first fatal mistake. That afternoon, the duty room of the Arlington Police Department was drowning in the pale green glow of neon lights, the kind of light that made everyone look more exhausted and irritable than they actually were. But for Daniel Cotter, his mind was lit up in a completely different way. He could not shake the image of the woman in plain clothes, unnervingly calm, walking straight into the courthouse as if she owned the place. A suspicious civilian would never be allowed through by federal security like that. The thought gnawed at him, agitated him, and more importantly, made him feel insulted. He leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on the laptop screen. Officer Mark Jensen typed heavily on the keyboard, each keystroke thudding through the cramped room. Under that rhythmic clicking, Cotter still heard the echo of the slap from that morning replaying over and over in his mind, not with regret, but with the irritation of feeling like he had overlooked something. Linda Parker sat behind them, fingers intertwined tightly, as if trying to hide the tightness in her throat. The image of Elena Morgan kneeling to gather each document with such extraordinary restraint still haunted her. No one endured something like that unless they were protecting a secret far larger. Parker dared not say the thought out loud, but her gut had already begun to shift. Suddenly Jensen tapped his keyboard and looked up. Got it. Rebecca Morgan, Southside, address clean, record occupation, listed as union rep assistant. Nothing unusual. Cotter's brow furrowed. Impossible. She was recognized by courthouse security. She walked straight into restricted areas. He stopped trying to reorganize his thoughts. Something was clearly wrong. At that moment, the car door opened, and a man stepped in, bringing with him the mix of cheap cologne and stale cigarette smoke. Charles Doyle, police union representative, 50 years old, round, face eyes, like a dull blade. Doyle settled into the front seat, lowering his sunglasses as he looked at Cotter with suspicion. "What was so urgent you had to call me in?" Cotter turned the laptop toward him. "This woman from this morning." "Something is off." Doyle skimmed the file, scoffing dismissively. "A woman from Southside walking into a courthouse. What's off about that?" But the smirk vanished the moment his eyes returned to the occupation line. Union rep assistant. An ordinary job, too ordinary to the point of being fabricated. Doyle shifted his gaze to Jensen. "Rerun the background. This time expand it to federal databases." Jensen hesitated. "I don't have clearance at that level." Doyle adjusted his tie with a heavy sigh. "I'll handle it." In just a few short minutes, the atmosphere in the car changed completely. The laptop screen displayed a stream of data that made Parker's heart drop with just a glance. Elena Morgan, 42 years old, federal judge, courtroom 3, member of the Special Investigative Task Force tied to the Romano case, on the short list for the Supreme Court. The entire car fell silent. Not just any silence, but the crushing kind shared by people who realized they had stepped on a landmine and did not know if they would survive it. Cotter's mouth opened first, but no sound came out. Eventually, 2 hoarse words escaped. "We're done." Doyle turned away, his large arm trembling under his suit jacket. Parker closed her eyes for a moment, guilt slamming into her chest. She remembered the handprint on Elena's cheek, the steady, fearless look in her eyes, as if she had known all along this would happen. Outside the car windows, Arlington went on like a peaceful city. But inside that cramped patrol vehicle, reality had just shifted. Assaulting a federal judge was not a small mistake. It could not be hidden, could not be dodged. It was political death, legal death, career death, all fused into one. Jensen forced himself to stay steady. So what now? Doyle swallowed, hard eyes glued to the file as if searching for an escape that did not exist. What now? We stop her, by any means necessary before she drags us all down. The words fell like a declaration of war. Parker looked at each man in the car, fear and unease sliding down her spine. They were about to do something terrible. And she knew with absolute certainty that if Elena lost her chance to speak today, the truth would be buried forever. In that moment, Parker realized she stood at a crossroads. One path was her career, her badge, her daughter's safety. The other was the justice she had sworn to uphold on the day she received that badge. Inside her chest, a quiet war began, and she knew whatever happened next would decide not just her fate, but the fate of the entire city. The courthouse doors closed behind Elena Morgan, leaving the noisy morning in the hands of those who had insulted her without understanding. They had touched the center of a storm, far greater than anything they imagined. The marble hallway was as silent as an old cathedral, white light stretching into long, cold bands. Elena moved through the familiar air, yet her heartbeat carried a different rhythm, the rhythm of someone stepping deeper into the territory of truth. In the shadowed corner near the first-floor restroom, the janitor starting his morning shift bent down to wring out a mop. No one noticed that the hands were too steady, the stance too precise, and the eyes sharp as a blade. Deputy Marshal Ethan Brooks looked up as Elena passed. A single, subtle nod, small enough that no one else would catch it, but Elena understood. He had heard her earlier call and knew the plan had shifted to its next phase. She did not slow her pace, but inside her thoughts rang like metal striking stone. Everything was in motion. There was no turning back. And this morning's slap on the courthouse steps was only the spark to ignite a tangled web of wires ready to explode. Behind her in the security room, 2 guards sat before a wall of monitors. When Elena's image appeared on screen, one of them, Stephen Clark in his mid-30s, and a former soldier froze. He whispered to his colleague, "That's Judge Morgan. They filed a false report this morning." She got stopped by some cops outside. His colleague looked up, eyes widening. Good Lord! They did not recognize her. Stephen shook his head, embarrassment and unease rising in his chest. In that moment, he sensed the morning incident would not end as a simple viral clip. It would grow spread and swallow anyone foolish enough to move closer to the most dangerous place of all, the center of federal justice. Meanwhile, Elena pressed the elevator button for the 5th floor. Inside, she leaned lightly against the steel wall, closing her eyes for a single breath. Only one. When she opened them, her face was once again cold and razor-sharp, carved from steel. The overhead lights reflected the red mark on her cheek more clearly, a stinging reminder of the contempt she had swallowed to keep the larger plan intact. The elevator doors opened with a soft sigh, carrying a wave of cool air from the vents. Court Clerk Martha Jenkins, 70 years old, with neatly pinned silver hair, stood up the moment she saw her. "Oh dear, your face!" Elena raised a hand. It is fine. I am not seriously hurt. We have more important matters. Martha wanted to ask more, but one look at Elena told her she should not. This was not a woman who complained about a slap. There was something larger at play, something that made enduring it necessary. Martha simply nodded and handed Elena a thick stack of papers, the latest update on the Romano file. A few changes came in last night, and there was a strange security notice from the 3rd floor. Elena took the documents, her eyes never losing that sharp scan. The 3rd floor. Her heartbeat paused. That was where the confidential witness room was located. If anything stirred there, only 2 possibilities existed. Either the FBI was monitoring something, or Cotter's side had discovered something. She needed to check. Her phone vibrated. On the screen, Special Agent Rachel Kim. Elena answered and stepped into her office, locking the door behind her. Rachel's voice was low and taut, like a wire pulled to the breaking point. They walked right into the trap this morning. External cameras got everything. Our team also recorded their unusually aggressive behavior. And one more thing. Union Rep Doyle is on the move. He is not at the union office like usual. Looks like they suspect you. Elena sat down, placing her hand on the Romano file. Every page represented months of danger, and this morning's humiliation was only a thin layer of dust on a far larger operation. This was no longer investigation. This was the final gamble. She replied softly, "Good. Let them think that. The more panicked they are, the more they reveal themselves." Footsteps rushed down the hallway. Stephen Clark was heading toward her office. Elena ended the call. Rachel spoke her final warning. "Remember, Elena, by the time they realize who you are, it will already be too late." Elena's lips curved faintly. "They will not only realize it, they will fall." The door opened. Stephen stepped in, face pale. "Judge, I think you need to know Arlington police are sending more officers to the courthouse. The number is not normal at all." In that moment, Elena understood that the slap this morning was only the beginning. Every movement was now accelerating toward the breaking point. And at the center of the storm, the woman dismissed as ordinary. The woman humiliated in public was the only one who knew she held the card that would collapse an entire corrupt empire. She rose, her eyes sharp as a blade. "Good. Let them come. Justice always needs an audience." The back lot of the Arlington Police Union headquarters echoed with the hard slam of a car door, ending a short meeting that felt as heavy as a death sentence. Charles Doyle stepped out first, sunglasses hiding the faint twitch in his eyes. He was a man accustomed to controlling every game from the shadows. Yet this morning, what he had seen in the classified file on Elena Morgan had made his palms turn cold with sweat. A federal judge, a candidate under consideration for the Supreme Court. And worst of all, the woman leading the investigation that had him, Cotter, and Hale sitting right in the center of the exposed web. Doyle left the lot, but his mind was spinning. He had always known the line between power and disaster. And this morning, Cotter had crossed it with both feet. A single slap he once would have dismissed as nothing now stood as the blade aimed at the corruption network he had spent nearly 2 decades building. In an office a few blocks away, Robert Hale, a police lieutenant with a face permanently flushed from pressure and hard liquor, sat in a cramped meeting room staring at his phone. A message from Doyle displayed a single word, "Urgent come now." Hale had already guessed the reason, but when he heard the full truth, his head went numb. The vein at his temple throbbed violently. He slammed his fist onto the table. My God, You are telling me he slapped a federal judge? No, not just any judge. She is Morgan. She is the one turning this entire city upside down. Doyle leaned back in his chair, his voice dropping like the delivery of a death notice. The Romano case has been running for 18 months. She is not just supervising, she is leading it. Every piece of evidence is in her hands. If she steps into that courtroom tomorrow, we are finished. Hale closed his eyes, picturing the files, the exchanged money, the times they had adjusted crime scenes on command. All of it would be exposed under the unforgiving white lights of a federal courtroom. There would be no surviving it. In that moment, Hale understood the truth. The network of corruption was no longer cracking. It was collapsing. At the same time, Cotter, the man who caused the disaster, stood in the locker room of the police department, staring into the mirror. His reflection showed shock twisted with panic. He had always believed he was tough, afraid of no one, unbothered by breaking rules when necessary. But federal law, that was a different beast. Elena Morgan was not a woman he could order around or detain. She belonged to a level of power he had never even touched. Until now. And now he knew his own hand had grabbed the throat of a serpent. The sharp click of the door opening made Cotter whirl around. Parker stepped inside, face pale. She said nothing for a long moment, just looked at him with fear, disappointment, and something that felt like a weight crushing her chest. When she finally spoke, her voice came out thin and breathless. Do you understand what you have done, Daniel? You assaulted a federal judge at the courthouse steps, a judge investigating police corruption. Do you understand what that means? Cotter clenched his jaw. I didn't know. I could not have known. She looked like a troublemaker. Parker let out a broken laugh, a sound filled with pain. A troublemaker would be escorted by federal security. A troublemaker walks through the staff entrance while guards stand at attention. Are you blind, or did you just refuse to see Cotter wanted to argue, but he couldn't? He remembered Elena's calm stare, the certainty in every movement she made. Not the look of fear, the look of someone who holds authority. Parker's phone vibrated. A photo popped onto the screen, her daughter standing in front of her school. The accompanying message, stay silent or pay the price. Parker froze, her blood turning to ice. She bit her lip until it bled, but hid the phone behind her. The room thickened with tension. This was no longer about discipline or pride. This was a battlefield. And everyone in it understood either they silenced Elena Morgan before she stepped into court tomorrow, or they would be crushed along with Doyle and Hale's entire operation. Doyle appeared in the doorway, voice rough. We have no choice left. If Elena takes the bench in the morning, we are dead. We move tonight. Right now. Parker looked at each man, feeling as though she stood at the edge of a dark cliff, everything around her beginning to slide downward. Beside her, these men were ready to drag the whole world down with them. But deep inside, Parker knew one thing with absolute clarity out there was a woman with a fresh handprint still on her cheek, and that woman held the truth in her hands. And now everything was racing toward her, very close, very fast. And Elena Morgan was more prepared than any of them realized. Night fell over Arlington faster than usual, as if the entire city were pulling itself inward before a storm about to erupt. On the 5th floor of the federal courthouse, the FBI's mobile surveillance unit hummed with tight, rapid clicks. Inside the black vehicle parked a few blocks away, Special Agent Rachel Kim sat before 6 glowing monitors, pale blue light washing over her focused face. Every camera feed, every radio frequency, every unusual movement within several city blocks was captured without missing a beat. Rachel leaned back slightly, sipping cold coffee. On the main screen was the image of Elena Morgan stepping out of her office into the hallway, steady breathing, measured steps, each movement precise. No one else could see the tension faintly visible between her brows, but Rachel saw it. She had followed Elena for 18 months throughout this deep cover operation, and she knew that whenever Elena appeared calmest, that was when the storm was closest to breaking open. One of the agents beside her leaned in and whispered, "They are moving. Look." He pointed to the corner of a monitor where the GPS signal had just picked up data from an Arlington patrol vehicle. 3 signals, 3 cars, all heading toward the courthouse. Rachel tightened her grip on the coffee cup. Not as fast as she expected, but fast enough to reveal their fear. And when frightened men try to fix their mistakes, they usually do something reckless. Across the city, Linda Parker sat curled in the driver's seat of her car, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. The photo of her daughter glowing on her phone screen felt like a knife driven straight into her heart. Parker had never been a coward, but a threat against her child was a price she never imagined she would pay for doing what was right. She looked around, then reached for the emergency number Elena had given only to high-risk witnesses. But she did not press the call. Her fingers trembled, then lowered. Not out of fear, out of guilt. How could she ask for protection from the very woman she had watched being humiliated earlier that morning? For one brief moment, Parker felt suspended on a broken bridge. One step forward meant falling into a void. Turning back meant crushing what was left of her conscience. She opened the car door, stepped out, and drew a long breath. She knew she no longer had many choices. Meanwhile, Elena closed her office door and turned page after page of the Romano file. Every sheet carried a dark story. Money routed through police pension funds, midnight calls between Doyle and Romano, recorded promises to bury crimes. Interspersed were the ruined lives left behind, victims forced to confess businesses extorted into silence. Elena replayed one of the recordings, Romano's raspy voice sounding like a trapped animal. "This time it's real. The feds are not saving you." And Doyle's reply, "She does not live to see tomorrow." Elena shut off the recorder. Her eyes deepened, grew heavier, not out of fear, but because she knew she was on the right path. When the truth pushes criminals to the point of threatening lives, that is proof justice is getting dangerously close. Rachel called. Her voice was sharp as a blade. "Elena, they are coming, 3 vehicles. Formation does not match routine patrol. Looks like Hale is directing them." Elena responded with a calmness as still as a lake before a storm. "Let them come. Everything is ready." Outside the office, security guard Stephen Clark appeared at the door, breath uneven. "Judge, we detected a group of Arlington officers entering through the main entrance. They gave no explanation." Elena looked directly at Stephen. "Mr. Clark, I trust you if they ask. Tell them I am on the 3rd floor." Stephen froze. The 3rd floor. That level holds the sealed witness courtroom. But he understood at once. Elena did not intend to hide. She intended to control the stage. Stephen hurried away. Elena stood before the mirror for several seconds. The red mark still burned across her cheek. She touched it lightly, refusing to let emotion intrude. The pain was real, but insignificant compared to what she was about to do. She thought of Parker. She thought of the young officers unknowingly trapped in the corruption network. She thought of the witnesses entrusting their lives to her, She thought of herself walking through 18 months of danger without backing down once. She opened Rachel's message again. By the time they realize who you are, it will be too late. Elena lifted the case file, drawing one deep breath. The moment had arrived. And just then, footsteps thundered down the hallway, fast, heavy, urgent. Cotter's team had arrived. The storm had begun pouring into the courthouse. But Elena stood at the eye of it. And she did not tremble. The sky over Arlington that night felt thick, as if the entire city were holding its breath, but inside the federal courthouse the air was even heavier. The hallway on the 3rd floor, usually quiet, as a cathedral, was torn open by the sharp, urgent thudding of 3 pairs of boots. Daniel Cotter led the charge. His face drawn tight, his eyes bloodshot with tension, and the weight of rage he could no longer contain. Behind him, Mark Jensen breathed in short, shaky bursts, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. Robert Hale trailed last each step, heavy as stone, as though the entire corrupt network he belonged to was dragging him toward its own collapse. The automatic doors to the 3rd floor slid open motion sensors, splashing cold, white light across the marble walls. Hale scanned the space, his chest tightening. Something felt wrong. Too clean, too quiet, too prepared. He grabbed Cotter's arm. "Wait. You are sure Elena is here?" Cotter's voice cracked like something brittle breaking. "She did not return to her office. She is not on the 5th floor, not in the main courtroom. She is playing some kind of game, and I am ending it tonight." But deep down, Cotter knew the truth. He controlled nothing now. The moment he slapped Elena that morning, he struck a machine far bigger than anything he had imagined. Now, all he could do was chase after the impossible, hoping to fix what could not be fixed. On the 5th floor inside the FBI's monitoring van, Rachel Kim stared at 3 red dots moving across the heat map. Her voice went low and steady like lake water before a thunderstorm. "They have entered the 3rd floor. All teams, prepare. Special response positions set. Do not allow them within 10 meters of her." One agent glanced at her nervously. "You are sure Elena wants this?" Rachel did not lift her eyes from the screens. She is about to force them to expose themselves. This is the final phase. In the sealed conference room on the 3rd floor, Elena Morgan sat alone. The overhead lights shone onto the Romano case file, spread before her photographs, recordings, dirty money transfers. She would present all of it in court the next morning. But tonight, it held another purpose, tearing down the last shield of the men descending upon her. Elena closed the file. She could already hear footsteps approaching from down the hall, unmistakable, sharp, impatient. She rose, not hurried, not relaxed. Every movement precise, as if she had rehearsed it 100 times. Martha, her clerk, had already been evacuated under federal orders. Stephen Clark stood at the far end of the hallway, hidden behind a wall, gripping his radio. If Elena signaled, he would activate the system that locked down all courthouse security doors. But Elena had told him earlier not yet. She did not want them stopped outside. She needed them to reveal their crimes right in front of her under the federal surveillance system they had no idea was running. A door 3 rooms away slammed open, crashing into the wall. Cotter was close. Elena closed her eyes for one brief second, steadying her heartbeat. A normal person would panic. A government employee would call security. But Elena was more than a judge. She was the center of the investigation. She was the one who set the trap. And she knew everything had to happen here. The footsteps stopped in front of the door. One hard breath. The door burst open. Cotter lunged into the room, his face twisted with fury and desperation. Hale followed, eyes wild, like a man watching his world fall apart. Jensen hovered at the back hands, trembling despite his efforts to hide it. Elena stood at the center of the room, not stepping back even half a pace. The overhead light illuminated the red mark on her cheek, the strike from that morning now glowing like a verdict, carved onto Cotter's conscience. Cotter let out a broken laugh, jagged and unstable. "You think you won? You think you can destroy us with a few pieces of paper?" Elena did not answer immediately. She simply tilted her head slightly, her gaze so cold, Jensen instinctively took a step back. Hale growled, "Hand over the file." "Now." Elena answered in a low, even voice, each word falling like a door locking behind them. "You arrived at the perfect time. And in the perfect place," Cotter sneered, trying to act brave. "No," Elena replied. "I am stating facts. You just walked into a sealed federal witness chamber. Everything here is being recorded. And you have delivered yourselves directly into evidence." Color drained from Cotter's face. Hale froze. Jensen's breath caught in his throat. In a single moment, Elena saw their collapse not caused by her, but by their own hands, their own choices. And then the hidden speakers switched on Rachel's voice, cutting across the room like the final bolt sliding into place. "Federal Tactical Unit move in. Targets confirmed. Courthouse is locking down." Hale spun toward the door, but it was already too late. Elena Morgan stood tall, eyes sharp as a blade. She did not need to shout. She did not need to threaten. She spoke just one sentence. "You have just signed your own ending." Outside the courthouse, the Arlington sky was ripped open by sirens, screaming like a pack of hunters closing in on their target. But on the third floor, in the narrow space, thick with panicked breaths, the silence felt even heavier, like the stillness right before a storm collapses on top of everything. Cotter, Hale, and Jensen stood trapped in the tightening psychological noose around their necks, each man feeling the invisible rope pulling tighter with every passing second. Elena Morgan said nothing more. She sat at the table, reopened the Romano file, and resumed reading with complete composure, as if this night were nothing more than another late shift. But to the three men facing her, the sight was maddening. This was the same woman they had mocked, insulted, dismissed as worthless, just hours earlier, now sitting calmly as if she had her hand on the pulse of their fate. Because she did. Cotter inhaled sharply, trying to drag himself out of the panic spiraling inside him. No, he could not let her control this. He stepped forward, but his legs shook, forcing Hale to grip his shoulder just to maintain some semblance of authority. Jensen stood behind them, his face so pale it was almost translucent, every breath he took carrying the taste of fear. The hidden speakers crackled again. "Federal tactical units are approaching. All exits secured." Cotter felt his lungs tighten. Hale forced his voice low, clinging to the last scraps of authority. "We still have options. She only has files. She only has her word. We can negotiate." Elena lifted her gaze, and Hale's voice died mid-sentence. Her tone was low, controlled, metallic. "Mr. Hale, I have 3 things you cannot negotiate. Romano's confession, the police pension fund transfers, and your own voice in the recordings. What do you think you can bargain with Jensen?" Stumbled back a step, lips trembling. "Our recordings." Elena did not look away from them. 18 months. Every call you made was monitored by federal oversight. Every transaction flagged. "You thought you were hunting me, but I guided you right here, into this room, at this exact time." The sound of tactical flashlights lit up the soundproof glass in the hallway. The federal agents had reached the control zone. Cotter suddenly snapped, lunging forward. "What do you want, huh? You want us to kneel? Beg. You think you are smarter than we are?" Elena closed her eyes for a single calm heartbeat. Not out of fear, out of pity. When she opened them, her voice dropped into a whisper that froze all three men in place. "I do not need you to kneel before me. Kneeling before justice is enough." A metallic click echoed outside, the unmistakable sound of federal weapons being readied. Rachel Kim led the team, each step precise and firm. Her voice filled the room through the speakers. "Delta team, prepare to breach. Targets 10 meters away." Hale spun toward the door, face drained of color. "No! We cannot let them in! We cannot!" He looked around wildly like an animal cornered against a wall. Jensen let out a thin, broken sound. "We are finished." Cotter reacted the opposite way. His desperation erupted into frantic movement. He lunged for the table, trying to snatch the file from Elena's hands, but she shifted effortlessly aside. And in that split second, she rose to her full height, eyes blazing with the authority of someone who had passed judgment in sealed courts where truth had no shadows to hide in. "Daniel Cotter, I gave you a chance to stop this morning. You chose to continue, and now there is no path back." The metallic thud behind them signaled the automatic locks engaging. The tactical team had reached the final door. A black shadow swept across the glass, the beam of a flashlight cutting across Cotter's face, forcing him to shield his eyes. Inside the room, Elena stepped back as if granting them the stage for their final moment. Rachel's voice crackled through the radio. "Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The door exploded open icy air, rushing in with the blinding white glare of tactical lights. Cotter, Hale, and Jensen froze like statues. No excuses left, no escape routes remaining. Everything had ended long before they even stepped into the room. In that moment, Elena looked at them, the three men who once believed they could crush her, erase her, and walk away untouched. Her expression was steady, almost serene, not triumphant, not vengeful. Just the quiet confirmation of an undeniable truth. Those who underestimate her had already dug their own graves. The third-floor hallway, after the federal tactical team stormed in, descended into chaos. Yet beneath all the urgent noise, one thing was unmistakable. Elena Morgan never once looked at the three officers now bound on the floor. She pulled her gaze away from them as if they were nothing more than shadows that had thrown themselves into a pit. Her work was not finished. The largest, most dangerous piece of the puzzle was still out there. Rachel Kim stepped in, pulling off her protective goggles, breathing hard. She looked at Elena with a mix of relief and unease. "We have the three of them secured. But Doyle, he's vanished, and Hale has not said a word." Elena had expected that. She closed the Romano file with a soft, deliberate sound before speaking. "Doyle never stays near the place where he plants his rot. If he ran, it means he knows tonight is the last night he has a chance to escape." Rachel looked directly at Elena and saw something clearly. The woman standing before her was not a victim who had been slapped, not a powerless figure who needed defending. Elena looked like a commander who could see the entire battlefield and knew another strike was coming. Rachel clenched her jaw. The FBI is sweeping for his location, but he has allies. The Romano investigation touched the entire system. They will not let you walk into that courtroom tomorrow. Elena answered softly, but with cutting steel beneath every word. "It does not matter whether they let me or not. I will walk into that courtroom. whether they want it or not. Outside the courthouse, Arlington no longer resembled its familiar cityscape. Police lights washed over the streets in blue and red flashes, radios crackled with frantic chatter, and anxious citizens gathered near the barriers. News spread quickly. Officers had been arrested inside the federal courthouse. The person who filmed the scene that morning had uploaded newer clips showing Cotter handcuffed Hale restrained Jensen trembling. The hashtag Justice for Elena was spreading like wildfire. A few blocks away, Linda Parker sat in her car, hands shaking so badly she had to grip the steering wheel to steady them. Her phone screen still glowed with the threatening message. The moment the GPS signals of Cotter's team went dark, she knew something had happened, something big enough to shatter Doyle's plan completely. Fear for her daughter constricted her throat, but beneath the fear was shame. Elena Morgan had endured being slapped, humiliated, detained, all to protect someone like her, a young officer trapped between right and wrong. And in return, she had stayed silent. Linda unlocked her phone with trembling fingers. She tapped the number Elena had given her during an interview 2 months earlier, when Elena had still been undercover as a union representative collecting testimony. That day, Elena had said, something Linda never forgot. When the moment comes that you realize you can no longer stay silent, call me. I will answer. Linda never thought the day would come. When the call connected, Rachel's voice came through cold but quick. Who is this? Parker forced herself to breathe. I am Linda Parker. I know the whole network. Cotter, Hale, Doyle. I have texts. I have calls. I want to testify. I want to protect my daughter. Please. Rachel sat bolt upright in the command van. Elena, she called. Linda Parker just phoned. She wants to testify. Elena did not speak for several seconds. Then she closed her eyes as if hearing something she had quietly waited 18 months for. Send her location. Get her into federal protection. And Rachel makes sure she is not being followed. Parker had no idea that at the very moment she made the call, 3 black unmarked vehicles were pulling out of the underground garage beneath the police union headquarters. In the first car, Charles Doyle gripped his phone so tightly the plastic creaked. His face had drained of color, his voice raspy with rage. She trapped us from the first minute. Tonight we cut her off. If not tomorrow, we all end up in cuffs. The man in the passenger seat asked quietly, and Parker Doyle's jaw clenched. If Parker talks, we lose everything. Back inside the Arlington Federal Courthouse, the 3rd floor was now fully locked down. Tactical teams swept each corridor. The 3 arrested officers were being moved to holding cells. But Elena Morgan did not look at them. She stepped into the hallway, handed the Romano file to Rachel. Keep this copy and back it up immediately. Rachel hesitated. Elena, the courthouse will be flooded with press tomorrow. You can request special protection. You can stay in a safe room tonight. Elena looked through the thick glass at the city glowing under thousands of lights. Night wind moved through the hallway, cool and vast, like the sky before lightning strikes. No, she answered slowly. I am not hiding. They used violence to silence me. I will use justice to make them listen. And in that moment, Elena felt it clearly. The battle was no longer in the shadows. It was stepping into the light. And tomorrow morning, every lie would be swallowed whole by the truth she had spent 18 months earning with blood, with tears, and with the humiliation she had endured in silence. The war had begun, and she would be the one to end it. The sky over Arlington had just begun to pale thin streaks of cloud torn apart by the glow of the city lights. But beneath the police station in the basement holding area, the air felt thick like mud, suffocating enough that those standing inside had to breathe through their throats rather than their lungs. The three officers just arrested Cotter Hale and Jensen were pushed into separate holding cells' heads, bowed, hands cuffed tightly behind them. They no longer resembled the men who had wielded power for years. Now they were just three frightened silhouettes trembling as they waited for judgment from the very system they had once mocked. Above ground, Elena Morgan stepped out of the federal vehicle with two agents beside her. The slap from the morning still marked her cheek, yet her face carried an uncanny radiance, calm and unwavering, as if she had known every move in advance. Crowds packed the courthouse entrance, hundreds of phones lifted to record her arrival, no longer seeing her as a victim, but as a survivor walking out of the storm to finish the fight. Whispered voices spread through the crowd. "That is her. The judge who was attacked this morning. She is still standing." And beneath those murmurs, Elena heard something far more important, faith shifting back toward justice. Across the street in a dim office building, Charles Doyle stood by a window, watching federal lights sweep across the courthouse like a swarm, searching for its target. He understood perfectly if Elena reached the bench in the morning, the corruption network he had protected for 18 years would turn to ash. His voice tore out like a snarl. "Get the car! We need to get there before the feds take full control." But he did not know that in another corner of the city, Linda Parker was hurrying into the federal building, flanked closely by two armed agents escorting her to the secure zone. Her eyes were red, her breath short not from running, but from the knowledge that once she spoke, Doyle's entire plan would crumble. She grabbed the agent's sleeve, her voice shaking like a child's. "Please, protect my daughter. I will testify. I will tell everything." The agent nodded, guiding her into the sealed room. As the door closed, Parker broke down for a moment, but immediately forced herself steady again, knowing that only truth could save her family now. Inside the courthouse, Elena stepped into the preparation room for the coming hearing. Rachel Kim placed 3 printed copies of the evidence file on the table, her voice firm. "All evidence has been backed up. Romano has signed cooperation papers. Parker is giving her statement in the next room. What remains is only tomorrow morning." Elena flipped a page, her gaze sharp as a blade. Every piece of data, every number, every recorded exchange, all of it would be presented in full view within hours. When she lifted her eyes, the room fell into a solemn quiet. Tonight was not the end. Tonight was the final breath before the flood of truth. Elena walked to the window, looking out at the city, at the lights of federal vehicles, at the clusters of people gathering outside the gates, at the night wind brushing through the trees. Everything was waiting. Waiting for the moment justice would break the dark. She touched her cheek, where the slap still burned faintly. But this time she felt no pain. She felt a reminder tomorrow no one would be able to bury the truth. And when the clock struck 3 in the morning, Elena Morgan spoke softly to herself. This is the moment they must face everything. This is the moment the city wakes up. Morning swept into Arlington like a sharp blade, cold, precise, and unforgiving. As the first light cut across the glass buildings, the federal courthouse awakened with a strange energy, quiet enough to hear every footstep, yet tense, like a steel wire stretched to its breaking point. Today was the day of the historic trial. And today, Elena Morgan would step onto the judge's bench after a night of being arrested, humiliated, and threatened. But she did not bow. She returned as if the very storm had delivered her to where she belonged. The courthouse grounds were packed with people. Dozens of news crews had set up their cameras, reporters pushing toward the entrance as if waiting to witness something greater than a trial. The return of the woman they had seen slapped the previous morning. No one knew the full story, but everyone saw the unwavering resolve on her face. This was not a woman who shrank back. This was a woman returning to tear open an entire system. Inside, federal tactical teams formed secure lines. Rachel Kim stood at the center of the main hall headset, on eyes sweeping every angle. Every entry point was locked, every blind spot covered by cameras. They would not let anyone interfere with Elena again. When Rachel saw Elena walk into the hallway, she automatically straightened a gesture of respect. Elena approached, hair tied neatly, the black judge's robe flowing with each deliberate step. The slap mark on her cheek had faded slightly, but remained clear enough to remind everyone that justice today would not only be carried out through law, but through endurance. Rachel spoke quietly. "Parker has been moved to the agent's room." She finished her testimony. Her information will be presented in Part 3 of the hearing. Elena nodded, eyes fixed on the main courtroom doors, slightly ajar. "Good." And Doyle Rachel answered in a low voice. "He is trying to run, but he will not escape the federal net." Elena needed no more details. She knew that everything she had prepared over 18 months would be brought into the light this morning. Every page, every recording, every witness statement would strike at the largest corruption network the city of Arlington had ever seen. In the holding cells, Daniel Cotter sat curled up, hands bound in front. His eyes were darkened, haunted by the image of the woman he had slapped. His voice trembled as he spoke to Hale in the next cell. "We will be killed in prison. You understand that the criminals we put away will kill us." Hale responded with a tired breath. "Our mistakes killed us first." Jensen sobbed quietly in the third cell, the helpless crying of a man who finally understood what true collapse felt like. Meanwhile, in the secure witness room nearby, Linda Parker sat before two federal agents. Her eyes were red, but her voice had changed, firm and clear. She had signed the final deposition, her hand still shaking when she set down the pen, but her gaze no longer avoiding the truth. She asked one question that made the entire room fall silent. "When can I see my daughter?" The agent answered immediately. "After the hearing. You and your family will be moved to a special protection program." Parker nodded through tears. She knew this morning would save not only herself, but the child she swore to protect. At exactly 8 o'clock, the courtroom bell rang, a long, deep sound that seemed to bring the entire city to a halt. Everyone rose, the doors opened, and Elena Morgan walked in. No one could mistake her for anyone else. Her steps were firm, steady, carrying the calm certainty of someone who knows she is stepping onto a battlefield she must win. She took her seat, the gavel resting before her. Elena's eyes swept across the courtroom. Romano sat at the defendant's bench, hands cuffed. Behind him was the row reserved for those who once believed themselves untouchable Cotter Hale Jensen and several other implicated officers arrested at dawn. In the front row, Rachel Kim stood with folded arms. In the center of the room, reporters surged like waves. Elena lifted the gavel. The strike rang out strong, sharp, commanding the entire courtroom into silence. The trial began. The prosecutor presented the first layer of evidence: financial records, covert transfers, the gutted police pension fund. More than 200 pages were projected on the large screen. Each number was a blow to Romano's empire. The second layer was audio. Voices filled the room: Romano's, Cotter's hails. Schemes, threats, money transfers, orders to alter reports. Every sentence opened another door to the truth they could no longer deny. Then came Part 3, the testimony of Linda Parker. She stepped onto the stand, hands trembling but voice steady. She detailed Doyle's threats, Cotter's violence, the system that had been bought from within. Every word she spoke tore down the wall of silence they had built. Finally, the recording that froze the entire courtroom Hale's voice the night before. If Morgan lives until tomorrow, we die. Elena looked directly at the three men. In their eyes, she saw despair, regret arriving far too late, and the darkness of years spent abusing power. She struck the gavel one final time. The court delivered its verdict. Romano, life imprisonment. Cotter, Hale, Jensen. Federal sentences with no possibility of reduction. Doyle was arrested at the union headquarters while attempting to flee. The entire corruption network officially collapsed. When Elena stepped down from the bench, the entire courtroom rose. Not because they were required to, but because they had witnessed someone who had been humiliated rise and turn that humiliation into victory. Outside, the morning light burned bright as if confirming that truth had prevailed. Elena descended the courthouse steps where she had been slapped the day before, this time with the posture of someone who had done exactly what the entire city had been waiting for, restoring justice to its rightful place. And from that moment on, Arlington was never the same again. From the perspective of a specialist in integrity and systemic reform, Elena Morgan's story proves that justice never comes from the perfection of any institution, but from the courage of individuals who dare to rise, dare to pay the price, and dare to move beyond fear to protect the truth. If you believe stories like this deserve to be shared to inspire meaningful change, please like and subscribe so we can continue bringing you even more powerful journeys toward justice. And do not forget to leave a comment. Live for the truth. Live.